Shabbat Shalom. Everybody have a good Hanukkah? Yeah, good deal. Good to see you. Glad you're here. Are you ready for the word? Matthew 2. Now when Yeshua was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where the Messiah should be born. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah, for out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had privately called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search diligently for the young child. And when you found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. When they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned of God, it says, in a dream, that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. In all, or at least almost all, church Christmas plays, and in all church nativity scenes, in many living rooms and on many lawns during December, you see a representation of these wise men, usually three, but you see these wise men depicted. In the church I grew up in, during their Christmas plays, at least three young boys would put on their dad's bathrobes, tie a makeshift cloth hat of some kind around their head, and put on some kind of fake beard and portray the wise men in a play. It is an accepted part of the celebration of the birth of the Messiah to include the wise men mentioned here in Matthew 2. Well, yesterday I was driving down the road minding my own business. When the Ruach HaKodesh prompted me to examine those men more thoroughly. And I've learned through the years to pay attention to those promptings. This morning I want us to get a biblical perspective of just who these men were, and thereby determine if they ought to be honored when we're honoring the birth of the Messiah. Let's start by looking to see if there's any evidence here that Yahweh sent these men. Let's make a list of things that might point to them being sent by Yahweh. First thing we see there in our King James Version is they're called wise men. That's good, right? To be called a wise man. Second, they traveled a great distance. They came from the east. They came from afar. That at least shows great determination. It says they saw stars. They saw one when Messiah was born and one over Bethlehem when they came looking for him, which would have been many months later. So Yahweh must have shown that to them and led them there, right? He must have shown them that star or those stars. It says they came bearing gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. All of these things have great value. So that's always a good thing, right? And they knelt down before Yeshua and worshiped him. That always shows that a person is right with Yahweh, right? And the other thing we read about him is they didn't tell Herod where he was. And for all of those reasons, they have been celebrated and given a place of honor at all December remembrances of the Messiah's birth. We've always accepted those things as being indications of them being men who had great honor, and therefore should be remembered and honored by all generations when we're talking about the Messiah and about his birth. But let's take a closer look. Just as the Holy Spirit prompted me yesterday, let's get a biblical perspective of who they are. I want to begin by asking you two simple questions. No matter what else you got going on in your head, the sound of that ice maker behind me or whatever else, I want you to consider two simple questions with me. If Yahweh sent them there, if He led them there, He had to know, didn't He, that their actions would result in the slaughter of every child 2 years old and younger in Bethlehem and the coast thereof, the surrounding region. Matthew 2, you look down in verse 16. Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceeding wroth. He sent forth, slew all the children that were in Bethlehem and in all the coast thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, And Ramah was there a voice heard, lamentation and weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and would not be comforted because they are not. That's found in Jeremiah 31:15. So if Yahweh did indeed send them, He had to know that their presence and their actions would result in this slaughter of children. So my question is, would Yahweh have done that just to get money to Joseph and Mary? That's the reason that I've always been given for the gifts. The way it's taught is that Yahweh sent them with money so that Joseph would have the means to move his family to Egypt. He needed money. So Yahweh sent these wise men with money and frankincense and myrrh to provide for them in the years to come. But here's the question I ask. Would He have had to move to Egypt if the wise men had not alerted Herod that there was a king in his territory? No, He wouldn't have. If Joseph did need money, would Yahweh be willing to sacrifice the death of the children 2 years old and younger in Bethlehem just to get him that money? And the answer is no. So this is our first clue that we should have been taking a closer look at those men who were there, and we should be taking a closer look at who sent them, which we're doing now. Question one is, would Yahweh have set in motion a plan that would have babies in Bethlehem slaughtered? The answer to that is no. Question two is this: would Yahweh use wise men to do His work? Would Yahweh use wise men to do His work? The NIV translates it Magi, M-A-G-I. The New American Standard calls them Magi. The Good News Bible translates it and says, calls them men who studied the stars. And the Greek word translated wise men is magos, M-A-G-O-S, magos. Strong's Dictionary defines magos this way. It says it's of a foreign origin, meaning it comes out of Hebrew, and it means a Magian, M-A-G-I-A-N, a Magian. Thus, Magi, New American Standard, and the NIV. Magi is a Magian. Strong's goes on to say it's an Oriental scientist. By implication, it refers to a magician. It's also translated not only as wise man, but it's translated as sorcerer. So a magos is a Magian. And let's look at the origin of the word. It says it refers it back to Hebrew number 7248. That word is the word rabmag, R-A-B-M-A-G. And if you look up rabmag, Strong says that word means a Magian. Or, Strong says, a Babylonian official, which comes from the root word rab, which means a great one or a man of high rank. So a magician traces back to be a man who is highly revered in Babylon. So let's go read about these men who are called Magians highly revered in Babylon. Go to Daniel 2. And in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Then the king commanded to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans, for to show the king his dream. So they came and stood before the king. And the king of Babylon called these men he greatly revered. We have 4 designations of wise men in Babylon. They're all lumped together as being consultants to Nebuchadnezzar, advisors. You have magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and Chaldeans. They all excel in different practices associated with the Babylonian religion. Magicians, Strong's identifies them as horoscopists, people skilled in the art of horoscopes. They use the stars to predict people's lives. Astrologers, they practice enchantments according to Strong's. It's the ability to cast a spell on someone or something. They're called conjurers. They conjure up powers from the spirit realm. Sorcerers, Strong says they are ones who whisper spells or cast spells. They are those who practice witchcraft. Chaldeans simply refers to, like the astrologers, they would be linked in with the astrologers, but they are specifically from the Babylonian region of Chaldea. Chaldea was known to have men who were good in astrology, that is, good at conjuring up powers. These are the men of high rank who served as advisors to Nebuchadnezzar. And the men mentioned in Matthew 2 came from that region. We're told they came from the east. They came out of what would be modern day Iran, which was formerly Persia, which was formerly Babylon. They are Magians. Magian is a term of honor given to any magician, sorcerer, astrologer, or Chaldean. But the question is, would Yahweh use a Magian to do His work? Look in Exodus 22, verse 18. You shall not suffer or allow, you shall not allow a witch to live. It's the same word translated as sorcerer in Daniel 2. You shall not allow a sorcerer to live. It's a reference to one who would be called a Magian. Look in Deuteronomy 18. Verse 9. Deuteronomy 18:9. When you are coming to the land which Yahweh your Elohim gives you, you shall not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. Do not learn to do after their abominations. So, the nations learned how to do some things that might be tempting to also learn. Get that now. If it was useless to know, nobody'd be tempted to know it. But there is some perceived benefit from knowing what they know and learning what they have learned. So Yahweh says, do not learn to do those same things. Well, what might those be? Verse 10. There shall not be found among you anyone that makes his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that uses divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. Pass through the fire is not a sacrifice, but it's some type of occultic practice to connect children to Molech. Divination is the ability to determine events by a magical scroll. Observer of times, it's a weird translation. It means to cover over. It refers to somebody who practices magic, is able to cover things over and practice magic. It's also at other times translated as a soothsayer. Enchanter is one who whispers or casts spells or foretells the future. A witch, we saw that earlier, a sorcerer, one who learns how to cast spells. A charmer, one who uses charms to cast spells on societies. Consulter with familiar spirits. That one doesn't even sound good. It's one who contacts the dead without realizing that what they're actually contacting is evil spirits. A wizard is one who has supernatural knowledge and offers advice based on that supernatural knowledge. A necromancer is one who fellowships with the dead. Verse 12, for all that do these things are an abomination unto Yahweh. Notice he didn't say they're harmless practices, just ignore them, it's a waste of time. He said all that do these things are an abomination to Yahweh. And because of these abominations, Yahweh your Elohim does drive them out from before you. You shall be perfect with Yahweh your Elohim. For these nations which you shall possess, hearken unto observers of times and unto diviners. But as for you, Yahweh your Elohim has not allowed you so to do. These nations hearken to these kinds of men, but don't you do it. So, back to my second question, would Yahweh then use a Magian to do his work? The biblical evidence is that he would not. How could he condemn them in Torah, call them and their practices an abomination, forbid his people from learning these skills and from seeking their counsel, and then at the birth of the Messiah to use some of these Magians to accomplish a task? He would not. So if Yahweh would not set in motion a plan that would result in all babies 2 years old and younger being killed in Bethlehem, and if Yahweh would never use a Magian to do his work, why then are they being honored, and where did they come from? I'd like to show you the biblical evidence that they were sent by and working for Satan. Let me begin by pointing out that Magians have powers that cause them to be elevated in society. They're high-ranking ones. They became high-ranking ones because they had special powers. Let me also point out that these powers did not come from Yahweh, because Yahweh calls them an abomination. That means their power has to come from Satan, the fallen angels who work for and with him, and evil spirits that are in the earth. Here's my point. There are no good Magians. There are only bad Magians. And just because a bad Magian does a good thing, that doesn't make him a good Magian or make a Magian good. There are no good Magians. There are no good Magis, and they are only bad. So if Magians get their powers from and work for Satan and the spirits that serve him, then we have to ponder this question. Why did he send them to Bethlehem? And once I began to examine this yesterday, I found the answer is blatantly obvious. We haven't seen it because we were too heavily influenced as children by Christmas stories and plays to see it. But the reason that they were sent by Satan to Bethlehem is to instigate corruption and the death of the Messiah. Let me show you what I mean by corruption or death. In Luke 4, Yeshua has fasted for 40 days. Satan comes to him to tempt him. What is Satan's intent when he comes to Yeshua after the 40 days of fasting? He has two intentions. Either one, to corrupt him, or two, to see him die. He set out to corrupt him by offering him all the wealth in the world, and he set out to kill him by coaxing him to prove who he was by getting him to jump off the highest point of the temple. In Matthew 2, we see the same thing happening that happened in Luke 4. It is an attempt to corrupt by riches or to have him killed. You might say, well, yeah, but Yeshua was younger than 2 years old. He couldn't be tempted by riches to become corrupt. Well, that's true. But what about Joseph? In Luke 2, we read about the birth of the Messiah and how shepherds were in the field keeping watch over their flocks. When suddenly the angel of Yahweh appeared to them, his glory shone all around them, and this angel of Yahweh announced that Messiah had been born. And suddenly there was a whole host of heavenly beings, and they were shouting or singing, "Glory to Yahweh in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill to men." And they went into Bethlehem and found the Messiah. Read it in Luke 2. They didn't bring gifts, and they didn't fall down and worship. They did rejoice, and they went out and told everyone what had happened to them in the field, but they don't bring gifts and they don't worship. And when everyone heard what the shepherds had to say, there is no record that any of them came to worship or that any of them brought gifts. But several months later, some Magi, some Magians who practice a different religion, came from afar. They came with gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And when they found them, they fell down and worshiped Yeshua. Such marvelous, miraculous, wonderful things tend to turn the hearts of people. These men were men of honor and respect and prestige. They had power, they had privilege, they had riches. They came in with pomp and circumstance. They were so powerful, they could walk into the palace and speak with a king when they arrived. They told of the miracle of the stars that led them to Joseph's home. They came into Joseph's home with great riches, and they fell down and worshiped the child. Such marvelous, miraculous, wonderful things tend to have the ability to turn the hearts of people. That's why we're told to follow Torah and not to pay attention to lying wonders performed by ministers of Satan. If somebody can perform miracles or prophesy and it come true, if somebody can work great miracles but they don't speak according to Torah, we're to stick with Torah, not to them. Satan sent the men, and I say that because I know they certainly weren't sent by Yahweh. And they came with stories of miracles, and they came with riches, they came with gifts. These are Satan's ways of turning the hearts of men from Yahweh. I can easily see that the intent of Satan was to have Joseph ponder in his heart, when nobody from Israel's come with gifts. Maybe we ought to go check out the religion of those Magi. Perhaps Yahweh sent them to us. Whatever his plan, if that was it, it didn't work. And you might be thinking exactly what I was thinking as I studied this. Yeah, but didn't Yahweh speak to him and tell him not to go back to Herod? Well, I thought that. And it confused me. But let's go back and read it in Matthew 2. Marie, we clicked that over. Thank you. Matthew 2, verse 12. And being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed in their own country another way. If you see the word God in the King James Version, you ought to be able to look it up and find the Greek word theos. Theos is the Greek word for God. But if you go to Matthew 2 and look it up, the Greek word for God is not in that verse. So make a note of this. Yahweh does not speak to Magi. Yahweh does not speak to or use astrologers, sorcerers, necromancers, consulters of familiar spirits, horoscopists, magicians, or any such person. They are spoken to, but it's not by Yahweh. That's why the word theos is not in verse 12. Here's what it says. And Krematizo, in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country. Being warned of God is the Greek word krematizo. And krematizo in a dream is what it actually says. Krematizo means to have something revealed or to be admonished. Not necessarily by Yahweh. You understand that? They did have something revealed and they were admonished, but that doesn't mean that Yahweh did it for them. All it says is that they were admonished in a dream. Where did the dream come from? I don't know. I know that Yahweh can and does speak through dreams. He did that to Joseph a couple of times in this story. But I also know that false prophets and false pastors can have dreams that did not come from Yahweh, but they think they did. Jeremiah said they run around saying, I have dreamed, I have dreamed. But Yahweh said their dreams didn't come from Him, and they prophesy lies out of their own heart. So these men were warned to not return to Herod. Where did the dream come from? I don't know. Could the dream have come from Yahweh? They could have been made to have a dream. But it makes more sense to me that Satan would instigate it in order to enrage Herod and to set in motion the next part of his plan, which is to have all of the children massacred in hopes that Messiah also would be killed. So my point is, there's no biblical statement that Yahweh spoke to these men, and we don't need to conclude or infer that they did. All right? But you might say, just as I did, but these men came and worshiped Yeshua. That also confused me, but let me make two very important statements here. Statement number one. Not everyone who serves Satan knows that they're serving Satan. Not everybody who serves Satan knows they're serving Satan. These men are in Satan's camp. We know that from Deuteronomy. They've made contact with fallen angels and evil spirits. That's how they became Magi. They use their powers for great gain, as is evidenced by their positions of honor and great wealth. But they don't know that they're serving Satan. They wouldn't do it on purpose. There's really only a small fraction of people who serve Him on purpose. Most are deceived into serving Him. These men think they have discovered and are serving the true God. And if they came from the region of Persia, Iran, or Babylon, they think that the true God they're serving is Ahura Mazda. And yeah, the Mazda car is named after him. Ahura Mazda. They have contact with spirit beings. They access power from these spirit beings, but they have no way of knowing that this power that they are experiencing comes from Satan. Make no mistake about it. Whoever it is they call on, they don't know it's Satan. They think it is God. They don't know that they've been deceived. The most horrible thing about deception is the deceived never know they're deceived. They think they're right. That's why you have Torah. We can't emphasize this enough. That's why you have Torah. Without Torah, we all become deceived. With Torah, we check what we believe. If what we believe doesn't line up with Torah, we change what we believe because we've been deceived into believing a lie. We check Torah to see what we should believe. Torah is the plumb line by which everyone must check themselves. So, we go back to these wise men. When they heard, or it was impressed upon them by some stars they had gazed upon, that a Messiah had been born, they go to find him. They have no idea that the one they serve, Ahura Mazda, or whoever he is, they have no idea that the one they serve has shown them this because he wants that child killed. In their heart, they think they're doing great honor to their God. In their heart, they think they're going to do great honor to the Messiah. They don't know that the master plan behind this, the master plan of the one they serve, is to have him killed. Most people who serve Satan don't know they're serving him. Let that sink in. Multitudes seeking and have no idea they're being sent to destroy him. So the first point I wanted to make is most who serve Satan don't know they are. Point 2, and you know this one, not all who come to worship Yeshua are accepted. Not all who come to worship Yeshua are accepted. So we should not allow our opinion of these men to be influenced by the fact that it says they came and fell down and worshiped him. Let me quickly remind you of 2 texts. Go to Mark chapter 7. When Bill's here, he always unplugs that ice maker. I know why now. I miss him. That thing can be a chore to speak over. Mark chapter 7, verse 6. Yeshua answered and said unto them, Well has Isaiah prophesied of you hypocrites, as it is written, This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts far from me. Listen to verse 7 closely. Howbeit, in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. Notice Yahweh said they worship me. He's not denying that they worship and not denying that their heart is, in their thoughts, they think they're worshiping Yahweh. But Yeshua said, or quoting Isaiah said, quoting Yahweh said, the doctrines they teach are the commandments of men. Verse 8 says they lay aside Torah. Verse 9 said they reject Torah. Verse 13 says they make Torah of no effect. That is, they rob it of its authority. As a result, what did Yahweh say about their worship? They worship me, but he said their worship is in vain. Let me translate that for you. They worship me, but their worship is unsuccessful, manipulative attempts that have no hope of achieving their purpose. Unsuccessful, manipulative attempts that have no hope of achieving their purpose. So when we read that the Magi worshiped Yeshua, don't let that influence you. Their worship is in vain. Next, I would remind you of Matthew chapter 7. Matthew 7:21 says this, Not everyone that says unto me, Master, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that does the will of my Father which is in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Master, have we not prophesied in your name, and in your name have cast out devils, and in your name done many wonderful works? And then I will profess to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. They worship. And they did what they thought was sacrificial service to Yahweh, and they did it in the name of Yeshua. They were shocked to find out that Yahweh did not accept them. They were shocked to find out they were condemned to perish. They protested for help from Yeshua to come stand by them and defend them. They said to him, we did everything we did in your name. And he said to them, you're lawless. You forsook Torah. Get away from me. I don't know you. So when we read about the Magi, Understand that the Magi and their presence in the church is just another reminder of how many people are deceived and how many people think that as long as in their hearts they're worshiping God or Jesus, that it doesn't matter whether they keep Torah or not. The Magi and the honor they receive is just another reminder of how contaminated, dark, and satanically influenced the celebration of December the 25th is. Magi are honored, Nimrod is honored, Mithra is honored, Solus Invictus is honored, Santa is honored, Catholicism is honored. The December 25th celebration of the birth of Messiah is contaminated, dark, and satanically influenced. The wise men are not wise at all. They're deceived workers of deception. Much the same way as all who promote Christmas. They don't know they're being used by Satan to seek to destroy the true Messiah. If you're still not convinced that the Magi are wicked men who were sent by Satan, should never be honored by anyone, then I close with two things. Acts 13, I'm going to read it, beginning in verse 4. Paul and Barnabas are being sent out for the first time, hands laid on them, they're being sent out. And here's what it says about their first missionary trip. Verse 4. So they being sent forth by the Holy Spirit departed unto Seleucia, and from there they sailed to Cyprus. And when they were at Salamis, they preached the word of Yahweh in the synagogue of the Jews, and they had also John to their minister. That'd be John Mark. And when they had gone through the Isle of Paphos, they found a certain sorcerer, a prophet, a Jew, whose name was Bar Jesus. Actually, his name was Bar Yeshua, son of Yeshua, which was with the deputy of the country, Sergius Paulus, a prudent man, who had called for Barnabas and Saul and desired to hear the word of Yahweh. But Elymas the sorcerer, for so is his name by interpretation, withstood them, seeking to turn away the deputy from the faith. Then Saul, who is also called Paul, filled with the Holy Spirit, set his eyes on him and said, O full of all subtlety and all mischief, you child of the devil, you enemy of righteousness, you not cease to pervert the right ways of Yahweh. And then it goes on down through there and tells us that Paul prophesied a blindness coming over him that did come upon that man. But I want you to notice that twice we're told that this man was a sorcerer. It's the Greek word magos, the same word translated wise man or wise men in Matthew 2. It's translated wise men in Matthew 2 to try to give a incorrect influence on how we see these men. They were sorcerers. They were astrologers. They were horoscopists. They were soothsayers. They were necromancers. They were men of high rank in the Babylonian religion. And notice what Paul says to this one that he encountered. He said, you're full of all subtlety and all mischief, you child of the devil. You're enemy of all righteousness, perverting the right ways of Yahweh. All subtlety and all mischief. Do you know what Paul's saying about that man? That man had learned the art of deceiving people and leading them astray through kindness and gentleness. Always carrying himself in such a way that he seemed to be a respectable man. He would never raise his voice. He would smile. Subtlety and mischief is a reference to his ability to smile and engage with people and pull them into his perversions. That's the way Magians work. I was just riding down the road yesterday minding my own business when the Holy Spirit prompted me to examine the wise men of Matthew chapter 2. I was not looking to do it. I was not thinking about doing it. Never even given thought to the wise men, the Magians of Matthew 2. But once I did what I was prompted to do, then I saw with great clarity that the biblical evidence is those men are the servants of Satan and should never be honored by anybody, and certainly shouldn't be honored by us. They were sent by Satan to kill the Messiah, and though they failed in that, it resulted in the slaughter of all of the babies in Bethlehem. And they came in with such deception, and the translation brings in such deception that now they are celebrated right along with Nimrod, right along with Mithra, right along with Santa, right along with everything associated with December the 25th. Evidently, Yahweh wanted you to know, wanted me to know, wanted us to know. Don't give honor to those men. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. As His name is put upon you, so shall He bless you. Hallelujah.